Martin Creamer from Mining Weekly Online. I think I was in Barry Davison's office when there was a substitution. Ford came through and said they're going to move to palladium. And it seemed to be easy. The substitution in the days gone past seemed to be quick. We used to say they're going to move from platinum to palladium, palladium to platinum. Now all of a sudden it seems a big headache. Has the engine changed? I believe there's extra heating now, or why is the substitution such a pain? And then, can you give me some idea what's happened with your line batteries? Are you ever going to get into the Tesla battery with some platinum and palladium and platinum with platinum? And my last one, what percentage of this enormous dividend goes to communities? Is there any way communities share in this enormous dividend? Thank you.
I think the question about such a pain, there's always been a needed to go through a process. I think we have to be careful not to overreact. We could very easily see tomorrow OEM come out and saying, because of course they realize what such an announcement would do. And so it wouldn't be unexpected to see an OEM come out and say, oh, we've got a big solution and a substitution for palladium, and it's called platinum. We know that, but in a hope to try and temper prices. And so I don't think you should be overly concerned if you see such a headline. The reality is that there is a solution available, there is a potential, and it's called platinum. So the second thing is, I think now there's, with the regulatory focus on real-world driving tests, CO2 emissions, and the VW emission scandal, that is a big deal for them. So in all likelihood, you're much more likely to see them being very, very cautious before they switch applications. And so I think that's why it won't perhaps be done as quickly as it was in the past. And in the past, the emission regulations were actually quite easy. You didn't have to be as fine in your mixture and your solution to get the right solution, to get the right emission legislation. So over years, if you look at that NOx, particulate matter, CO2, if you look at that table, how that has shrunk over many years, it's much, much more difficult to achieve that. And so the combination of they are much more cautious, it is tougher to find the right solution, and the fact is, yes, of course, the vehicle engines have changed. And so to get the right efficiencies, they have to spend more time coming up with the right technical solutions, and that's why they can't just do it overnight. And don't panic if you get an OEM saying, hey, we've got a solution for substitution for palladium and rhodium. In all likelihood, that substitution is going to be platinum. Because the fact is that they're actually really, really good metals. They do the job that they're required to do. I don't think we should underestimate the kind of pressure that the OEMs, the car manufacturers, have been under over the last number of years. And frankly, whilst it's a big deal in our lives, and we're trying to understand what's going on, in an OEM's life, they've had much bigger problems to deal with. So they've had big pressure from society around climate change as to what they're doing in their fleets to change electrification of their drivetrains, either through battery electric vehicles, fuel cells, or hybrid. And that's been a much bigger issue for them, is to try and find out how they're going to come up with models and solutions around electrification that society find acceptable. There's other two big issues that have been on their agenda, and that is around, also post the VW scandal, is around real-world driving tests. Now, you'll remember that in the VW scandal, on the roads, people were seeing substantially higher emissions than what was being tested in the lab. And eventually they were regulated and said, we won't let you sell vehicles that don't meet either 2.1 times and then reducing to 1.5 times and then 1 times what the emissions are that you set in the lab. And they've had to find solutions for that. Most of those solutions, I think, luckily for us, have been PGM solutions, but that's what the technical folk have been busy with. And then in particular in Europe, where many of these OEMs have their presence, they've had also CO2 targets. If you miss the CO2 targets, then you get billions of dollars worth of fines. Now, the combination of all of those things meant that actually for OEMs, the majority of their technical folk have been doing that work. And the price delta between palladium and platinum really hasn't been a big issue. And for a lot of the time, that was only about $70 that a car would cost you more. So you're not about to not sell a vehicle because it costs $70 more. And I think one of the important parts is, remember, the tide rises for everyone. So everyone's cars are just costing $70 more. That problem is now $200. And I think your point, Patrick, is it's not just about the price, it's whether you can get all the metal. And I think that's what's really starting to make the OEMs pay attention. And for the first time, we're actually hearing that they are doing some work around that. But even if they were to start today, everyone, and say, okay, we're going to go for this now, it still takes about 18 months for that to happen. So they've got to come up with their mixtures, they've got to test those mixtures, they've got to put 100,000 miles of that mixture under the clock, they've got to get regulatory approval, and only once they've got all that can they then change those mixtures into their vehicles. So I think, again, a long answer, but saying that OEMs are starting to look at the fabricators can confirm that they're seeing that, but not in a major way, though. I don't think we should say this is all now flat taps. And so I think in the next 18 months to 2 years is when you're likely to see this. But if the scarcity of metal becomes a much bigger problem, I think you're likely to see some of that time frame accelerated. Not necessarily just the price differential of these metals. But I think the important fact is we mentioned earlier, there is a solution to that. And we all been very, very clear to our customers, to the fabricators, guys, this is not panic stations. There are solutions, and it comes from the suite of metals that we mine. And when we see platinum moving across more into particularly the underfloor pans of gasoline vehicles, I think you're going to see demand more equalized to the kind of ratios that we produce.
You talk about paying out excess cash. You probably have enough in your savings to fund the Mogalakwena expansion, give or take. So does that really mean that from here you pay out all the cash you generate because you've held quite a bit back? I'm just trying to understand how we should look at your dividend going forward. Is there any reason for you to accumulate any more cash than you currently have? And then my second question is on Twickenham. There's got to be a lot of interest given where prices are at the moment. Is there an update on that disposal? Does it maybe make sense for you to run it in the meantime while you're waiting for a buyer?
So Leroy, when looking at the balance sheet, we have 17.3 billion rand of cash. 9.4 billion of that is in the customer prepayment. So when you strip that out, we're at 7.9 billion rand. We're paying out 11.2 billion rand in March. So we're paying out all sort of the available cash, excluding the customer prepayment. And in terms of our capital allocation framework, we will continue to reassess what we've generated in the period, what uses we have for that. So as we progress in the Mogalakwena expansion, that'll be taken into consideration. And certainly we'll continue to pay out the 40% base dividend of headline earnings. And any excess cash after that, we'll certainly return that to shareholders as we've demonstrated this year. So in terms of Twickenham, we do have a process underway in terms of the disposal. There has been some interest, but we'll follow that process. Now it's we're updating the mine plan at the moment, and expect to progress that in the second half of the year.
The question is, why not just run Twickenham? Remember, Twickenham has still got quite a bit of capital to be spent on it, including a concentrator. And in our hands, we've got better alternatives than to invest a fairly substantial amount of money that still needs to go into Twickenham. So that's the reason we wouldn't want to just start it up, because number one, you can't just start it up. There's still quite a bit of development and capital needed to be spent on a concentrator. Are we going to see us replacing Tesla batteries anytime soon with PGMs in there? I think it's really early to say. I think the majority of our work will still be focused around fuel cells and the hydrogen economy and the green economy. I think there's a much, much better potential for PGMs to form part of that solution than it is for PGMs to be part of batteries. But the fact is that PGMs do such amazing things in so many applications. We don't even know where some of the solutions in the future will come from. So who says that they can't be a really cost-effective solution for batteries? And that's why we're pursuing that option. But I don't think, if you asked us to hedge our bets, I think it would be better to expect a greater uptake in the green economy for platinum to be associated with hydrogen and fuel cells. And then lastly, what was the last one?
The communities.
The communities. So yes, we have the dividend allocation of 41.60 Rand to communities will be 260 million rand for H2, and 157 of that will go to them repaying their loans, and just over 100 million rand going to the communities themselves. So absolutely, they're shareholders like anyone else, and when we increase our dividends, they get their share.